Welcome to Ren Behind the Practice. I'm Sophie Campisi. I'm a holistic business strategist, and I spend a lot of my time in conversation with practitioners, coaches, and healers about the behind the scenes of their businesses. What I started noticing is that some of the most honest, important conversations about building a practice were happening quietly, one-on-one, behind the scenes, and often in isolation. Most practitioners are incredibly skilled at the work they do with their clients, but very few of us were ever taught or trained in how to build a successful startup business. And suddenly we've been left to figure it out on our own. This podcast exists to bring those conversations forward, the dreams, the uncertainty, the highs and lows, the recalibrations, and the messy middle. My hope is that by normalizing these conversations, we can soften the stigma, feel less alone, and start closing the gaps together. Today's guest is Tania Hansraj. Tania is a hypnotherapist, Reiki master, sound healer, and coach. Her calling and deepest soul-aligned purpose is to help 1 million women of color to unlock their personal power and step into their divine destinies. Tania, it's so great to have you here. Thank you so much for showing up to have this conversation with me.
So nice to meet you, Sophie. I'm so happy to be here.
Before we look behind the scenes today, can you share with us a little bit about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. So as you mentioned, I am a hypnotherapist. I'm a sound healer. I do a lot of subconscious mind, energetic, and nervous system work with women. My biggest vision is actually to be the Tony Robbins for women of color, because I really notice a big gap in the space in terms of, yes, there's all the belief work and the energetic work, but if you grew up in certain cultures and you grew up in more nuclear families, there's a whole nother level of beliefs and adoption of cultural conditioning that really affects your day-to-day life, your relationships, your money mindset. And also, you increase the likelihood of sexual assault and a lot of other things that are just going to kind of unaddressed in a lot of these big rooms and spaces. So it's something I'm really, really passionate about. In terms of how I work with women, I do a lot of one-on-one work, but I am excited to announce that I'm doing retreats this year. I have a couple of retreats in play this year, as well as group coaching. So it's a really, really exciting year and time in my business, a lot of expansion, but also a lot of what we're going to talk about here, which is like a lot of the behind the scenes messy middle that I'm navigating right now.
How long have you been doing this work?
So my background is actually from a corporate background. In a past life, I used to be a finance bro, and I worked in tech for a while. And I kind of transitioned into the coaching space in 2023, like beginning of 2023. So I'm coming in around 3 years now. I was a dating coach for a while, which was fun. You have a moment when you step into something new and it literally just clicks and you're like, okay, this feels right. This feels aligned. And it feels like the moment when that happened, I realized like this is work that I've done in like all of my past lives. And it's the work that I've always been meant to do. So this particular angle of it has only been about a year.
Is there a specific thing, like if you had to put words to like what exactly that angle is? You shared with us a lot about the work, but in the context of actually how you work with people, is there like one thing now that you're focusing on?
Yeah. So, right now, I feel like a lot of people are really craving community and just having that connection because we feel so disconnected. So this year, a lot of it is focused on sort of that community connection experience, which comes in the way of, as I mentioned, like kind of more real life experiences. I've been doing a lot of workshops and events that's transitioning into retreats as well. So I want to create as much connection and community as possible. It's beautiful to have one-on-one experiences and to be able to go deep with people for sure. But I think community connection is something that we're all lacking. And you really learn a lot just by observing and watching other people and feeling held in the space in the container with others as well.
When you look ahead to the next 6 to 12 months, what goals do you have for this next chapter of your work?
That's a great question. So my big goal for the next 6 to 12 months is like 1,000 women of color served. And that means, different things in terms of the format of what that looks like, right? It could be the group events, it could be the retreats. So the level of depth might be different, but yeah, 1,000 women served. And I, hoping to hit my revenue goals of like 500,000. That would be amazing if I could hit that, which is a big, big stretchy number for me. But yeah, those are kind of the two. I think my impact goal is sort of very centered for me. And as I did my work at the beginning of the year, I did a lot of manifestation work. And one of the things I kind of put aside was like, everything else, the numbers, everything else will kind of go to the back. But this 1,000 women goal, like, how do I make that happen? And everything else will kind of shake and fall into place as a result.
Do you have a solid, steady client flow coming into hitting that 1,000 goal, or is part of it trying to figure out what you need to put in place to get it to be really steady and solid? For compared to a lot of us when we're starting out, it's like a client here and there while we're trying to figure it out. Have you already hit that point where you're noticing like they are coming and it's consistent and now you want to reach a bigger number?
Yeah, no, good question. I definitely have had sort of more consistent months. I don't think it's necessarily been like, oh, we have all the funnel dialed in. So a lot of what I am focused on right now, especially in the next couple of weeks, is the clarity portion of how do we get super clear with the messaging? How do we get the funnels dialed in? Like, what are the pieces that are going to really bring people in? And, whether it's partnerships or whether it's doing low ticket offers, like those are the pieces that I'm really trying to dial in now, because obviously the 1,000 is very much like to some level a volume play, right? Some people would argue it's a bit easier to do like higher ticket, fewer people. And that's sort of a lot what I've had come in. A lot of that's come in through events and also through referrals. I have, some pretty strong referrals that come in. But yeah, I'm still trying to like line out and dial out how I'm going to get that consistent flow in terms of top of the funnel, bringing people in.
Do you have someone or something that's guiding your process, or right now are you trying to figure that part out on your own and learn as you go?
I have spent, I assume similar to you and a lot of the people listening, like a lot of money on a lot of coaches and a lot of programs. I did, the Tony Robbins programs past year doing business mastery. I've done other kind of coaching and group hypnosis and just all the different things. I've definitely worked on everything from strategy to mindset. Right now, I am in a specific program that's very focused on building a personal brand and kind of I had all the operational structures already built for when I was a dating coach. But that really did not sit with me, right? It really didn't feel like the aligned niche. I know a lot of us go through a lot of niches to figure out where we're going to land. And for me, so there's a lot of that framework and structure already existing. I already have some mailing lists and all that stuff. It's just like kind of a combination of everyone who was there before doesn't necessarily align with the work I do now. And so it's not really transposing A to B. And I think that's something a lot of us struggle with too, is like, if you are shifting niches, how do you make that move over? Do you clean up the list? Do you let people know? What do you do? And so a lot of that operations around that stuff is what I'm trying to figure out. So yes, and every coach you work with has their own structures and their own frameworks and their own funnels, and like webinars work and this works and that works, right? And so I think I definitely have like more discernment around that and around like what feels right to me, what's like not super energy zapping, what sort of like aligns with how I run the business and what I want to do. So I'm kind of using a lot of that combined with some of the structure I already have and like Frankensteining it myself a little bit as well.
I'm curious, in your experience, yes, I hired so many coaches. Would you say that any of the coaches or the programs that you've invested in really worked or like really nailed it for you? Or did it leave you having to be like, okay, it didn't really work, but this was valuable. And then you did several of those and now you're like Frankensteining because none of it actually worked?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. And I would again assume my hallucination is that that's the case for a lot of people because when I first kind of got my coaching certification, I actually joined a business coaching program right from the get-go. I have a business background. I have an MBA. I have a marketing background. You would think that, like when you come in with that foundations, yes, I do have some more experience potentially than some people, but it's a little different when you're kind of working on your own business, which is sort of, I think, the nature of what was happening is like that first coaching program that I did, the business coaching program, I thought I was getting ahead of it. And I'm like, oh, I'm being so prepared. And if I look back at it now, it was very bare bones. At the beginning, it was great because it helped me with certain pieces. Yes, my initial discovery call script and things like that, and how to do market research, like great. But it was maybe like a 10% of the foundation, super, super basic, right? And also I feel like a lot more helpful for people that like sold, for example, health coaching, like a very specific type of. I think when you have transformations that look a little different, that sometimes they're a little softer, right? When you're working on things like self-worth or money beliefs or whatever, versus like you're going to lose 10 pounds in 30 days. It's like a whole, even that alone, even though it's still a service, I feel like it just requires something different, because it requires people to like, how do you share a transformation in a way that it makes sense for the other person, in a way that it, if you think about the hierarchy of needs, it actually meets a need that they're looking for, that it feels important and tangible and strong enough that it's like, I want to do this now, not like, oh, I can do this later and this is great and let me find the money for it. And, like, so I think there was a lot of that where pieces worked, because yes, it was for some coaches, but it didn't really work for things that have a bit more of a softer or, less defined structure around it. Because that, I feel like that takes a lot more in terms of being able to describe your messaging and your offer and your transformation a little differently.
Absolutely. And yes, like you said, every person that I have this conversation with has had that experience. And the worst cases are people that got super, super burned and invested big amounts of money. And those are the hardest ones to have the conversation with and about. But the majority is exactly what you said. That was my experience of like nothing really worked. I learned little things here and there, but like nothing really nailed it. So yeah, I mean, every person that I have this conversation with, that is the pattern, and a big part of, why, not only why I do what I do now, but why this podcast exists is because, like you're saying, the businesses that we're running, heart-led, mission-driven businesses, they aren't like the normal type of business. It does take a different approach. Now, we can't bypass the vital business fundamentals and foundations that are needed, but how we go about it and how we understand it, it does have to be different. And I fell into that category. I went and did a deep dive, and part of my job became and is now to translate what I learned in a way to make it make sense for me and people like me. Because what I realized is like, yeah, the principles are there, but how it's being talked about, is it really landing? So some of the stuff that even I heard people say like, oh, you need to do this, like either they didn't really teach it well or they never told me how to do it. But whatever the reason, it didn't land for me and I wasn't doing it. And so, yeah, everything that you're saying is huge pattern. Like we're all, yeah, going through it and trying to figure it out. I think that, something else that you said that really hits home for me and a lot of people that I talk to is, and what I ultimately ended up discovering about, how I mentioned to you, I ended up becoming an expert in actual startups because so many of us have business skills from our backgrounds, but we aren't taught necessarily all the nuances and distinctions about what it was to be very good working in a corporate setting or for a business that has already found product market fit, has already grown, and is now in maturity phase. Like those business skills to keep that business going are just a different skill set than what it takes for navigating startup entrepreneurship, and what is the process for navigating the startup search phase to then find that product market fit. I call it offer market match, that sweet spot that then we can grow and then we can mature. And it's not talked about enough. And I think a lot of people have that experience. I absolutely did, being like, why can't I figure this out? I'm so skilled. I'm so qualified. I have such a strong background, but like, this should be simple. This should be easy. This is like a very small business. This is nothing compared to what I was doing before. But actually, it's like bringing golf gear to a soccer match. Like, it's just that it doesn't translate, and those like nuances aren't getting teased out enough and definitely aren't being talked about enough.
Yeah, I know. I agree. There's so much, I think, like guilt and shame that you have around it for yourself. And also, I feel like what other people reflect on you. It's funny because my job was literally, I was a go-to-market person. Like that was literally my job. I was like the positioning person. I was the messaging person. I was the go-to person. I was like helping to define the product. I was figuring out product market fit, like all of those things. And I was doing it at companies like PayPal and Venmo. I mean, these are behemoths. These are monster companies that have all the infrastructure, and they have all the learnings, and they have all the data, and they have all of the teams. And also, by the way, if a product fails, it really doesn't matter. It gets lost in like a sea of everything else, right? But a lot of times people will ask you, well, aren't you so good at this? Like, you're so good at the marketing. You're a marketing person. Like, why can't you figure this out for yourself? And so I think you also learn to internalize a lot of that, because you're like, I luckily did because I'm like, it's not the same thing. Like I recognize like I'm talking about a solopreneur business that is in the healing arts versus like something that's in the financial services space that's been around for a long period of time that has hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing budget. It's two different. In that scenario, if they wanted to make something work from a marketing perspective, they will. They'll find a way. They'll put some money behind it. They'll make some metrics work. It doesn't work like that when you're working for yourself with a cyclical business that you're trying to figure out. But yeah, I totally agree.
Going back to that 1,000 client goal for this next chapter for you, what do you feel like you need to do to get there?
I think definitely the first step is that clarity. But honestly, I think one of the biggest things that I've been trying to dial into this year is just like having, like being comfortable with like uncertainty. Because, and this is not to say this from an egotistical place, but I feel like I've been having more and more experiences of other people and other healers who are not as strong. I'll just say it that way, not as strong. And the difference between them and me is really just them putting themselves out there. And I feel like they'll take 1,000 shots and something will hit. I say it's the numbers game a little bit, right? And so they're not afraid to, like, they'll talk about their offers to no end. And because they're talking about it, they're inherently getting feedback and data back to be like, actually, this landed or this didn't, right? And they're putting themselves out to partners and other things. And I think we spend so much time being like, okay, I don't know about you, but I've done this so many times where I'll be like, okay, I'll meet someone and I'll be like, oh, let me look at their follower account. Like, are they, and it makes me feel cringy to myself to do it. But it's like, let me see, like, oh, this is why they were able to get the partnership. And it's just you talking yourself out of opportunity. And so I think, yes, there is like the clarity piece, I think is important because getting really clear about what you're talking about. But then besides that, I think it's just becoming open to that uncertainty and just taking the shots and knowing that it will be messy, but you're going to kind of learn along the way and you're going to learn from feedback. And by the way, you don't have to do it yourself. Like I've been really prioritizing partnerships and collaborations a lot this year because, why not like help and borrow people's audiences and collaborate with people who are really aligned and have like a good vision. I think if you trust in your message and your offer and you have the discernment, you're not going to have bad partnerships. And if you did, you'll still learn from them. And I think I think those are sort of the big things for me. And so the clarity, which includes mapping out the events and the retreats, like putting things on a calendar. So it's not just the offer and the messaging, but all those things. And then just kind of start shooting the shots with that is sort of the two big things that I'm kind of focusing on, especially for the next couple of months.
Is there anything that feels especially difficult or uncertain about those things?
I think we get like so caught up in our, like, for example, it's funny because I've had a lot of men in my space, like a lot of guys who wanted to work with me. I have a lot of, who want to come to my retreats, people I've just met. And so I think even for me, sometimes I get so tripped up on like, do I want to serve people of color? Or do I want to serve women of color? Am I excluding people? I think we get so tripped up on these like nuances. And then you kind of talk yourself out of it and you get stuck in this, like, they'll say analysis paralysis, like overthinking, and clarity becomes so difficult. Decision becomes difficult. And so I think it's like getting out of I think that's the biggest thing for me is like getting out of my own way for like being like faster on decision making, knowing that no decision can be like any decision can be undone. I do believe that. So I think just like getting faster with those decisions, I think for sure. And then I think also, obviously, like as a solopreneur, like there's a lot of, going back to the community comment I made earlier, like there's a lot of loneliness in it, right? There's a lot of like, no one's having these conversations. You're, by yourself building and creating and hoping things work and, looking at your own metrics, figuring all that stuff out. And I think sometimes it's easy to to get stuck in the wrong things, get stuck in the wrong details, to get stuck in the strategies, to get stuck in the inaction, to get stuck in the loneliness or the failures, what I mean? Like a lot of stuff that can be corrected just by nature of being in spaces with other people that are building things like you. For me, I've been kind of really putting myself out there actually more recently to meet more aligned women that are like entrepreneurs prioritizing joy and entrepreneurs prioritizing like safety and things like that, all the things that are important to me. And I feel like that's been really nice because there's this like community that wants to build together and support together. And yeah, so I think, but that can be really, really hard and really lonely, and all the shame and the guilt around the cyclicality of the business and the financial stuff. Like I'm in debt, that's a problem. Like it's hard to do that. And it's like, what do you do when you scratch your head? Like, okay, like now what? So there's a lot of that like thing. And it's like, how do you keep yourself from having stop moments when that happen, and like keep moving forward and having that forward momentum as well? I know I said a lot of things.
1,000%. No, that's everything you said. I'm just nodding my head over here for those of you that can't see me, because yeah, all those things, they are so true. So thank you for naming them and bringing those conversations out. And yeah, the loneliness and the isolation of solopreneurship, it is real. The weight of having to make all of the decisions on your own is real. Like, it adds up, especially if and when we aren't sure if this is the right decision to make. And that was me for so many years when I was trying to get my practice to be successful and sustainable. I'm a doer, it's like I'm going to do the things, but the burnout started coming from like, I'll make this decision. I'll even invest a lot of money. I'm also not even scared to go find an investor, go find money and rally someone behind me if I need to do it. But is this the right decision to make? Like, is this the right move? I don't know. And I think that wearing all of the hats of entrepreneurship and solopreneurship, and if you're into human design, I'm a projector. Like, I'm very aware that staying in my lane is very important. And a lot of my burnout started coming from the fact that I had to make a lot of decisions that I didn't have the skill and the expertise and the competency to make it. And that just started really weighing on me. And that's part of what was why I went down the deep dive to be like, okay, screw it. Because I kept craving some big picture vision from someone that was an expert. Now I know in startup building that could help guide me as a solopreneur in the steps so that I could be reminded and reaffirmed and gain confidence in the decision making of a very uncertain time. And you already named this as well in the other part of what you said. And you threw out so many great phrases like product market fit. Until we find it, it's going to be lean. There are going to be iterations. We're going to be making changes. We're going to be pivoting a lot until we nail it. And if we don't have support and connection and guidance and all of the things during that, that is a very, very taxing time. And the reality is, a lot of times it does just take time. And so what I realize, and most people don't have a lot of the distinctions that you have, the burnout comes and a lot of it is still so unclear and so foggy. It's hard to say, really, what was this? When really, when we look at it with the startup process, with a lot of the distinctions that you already threw out, a lot of the stuff that I know, it's very predictable, which is if you're running a startup, you have to nail product market fit at a certain point before you can grow. That phase of uncertainty, there's this thing called the design squiggle. It is a graphic that is used in the design and innovation process. You mentioned you've worked in tech and you've worked for these other sectors. What we're often not translating to our world is that we are going through that same startup process, that same design and innovation process, the same way as a tech founder would. And the messy beginning and middle is always going to happen, no matter what. There is no skipping it. But because we aren't getting taught or reminded or supported through that, like it can feel extra confusing and heavy and extra disorienting, rather than being like, this is right, right? Yeah, okay, this is right. Okay, I can go into the next day and having that guidance. So yeah, everything that you said, like I completely get. And we're all going through it. Like we're all going through that. And one thing I want to say, you're here, you're having this conversation. It's part of why I'm opening up these podcasts, because I keep hearing that feedback. People want to connect as peers around the business building. What we all do is so unique. We all have our own unique way of doing things, our own unique thing. What we all have in common, all million or millions of holistic practitioners, coaches, and healers, what we all have in common is that we're trying to figure out this business piece. Every single one of us has that in common at least. And we need connection around it. And so, yeah, so thank you for being here, because that's part of what people are saying, and we do need it.
I know, I appreciate that. I think the only other thing I will say that is, I think it's so important to have people, whether it's like friends or just other practitioners that are, because it's also a surprisingly competitive space, which I will say that my hallucination, and this has been proven to me, the universe keeps giving me this lesson, so I'm taking it now, was that like, oh, when you're in corporate, it's super competitive. It's normal to be competitive, And I really thought that over in the space of, to your point, being heart driven, soul aligned, who are here to like really just to serve and to help. And so I really had this very naive, I guess, misconception that we're all here to support and we're all here to help, and it's not competitive. And it's actually been a very big lesson to see that. And so I think that kind of can be a little challenging too, because I think it's, how do you build community when everyone's being so competitive with each other and you feel like, I want to share and I want to whatever, and then people are, yeah. So that's been an interesting lesson that I feel like I've learned. I keep learning over and over again, and I have finally learned now.
You saying that has come up with so many people, and I talked about it in one of my patterns episodes as being something I was surprised, because like you, like I was kind of naive, I guess, and thinking that like, I don't know, not that it didn't exist. I just am like, I'm living in my own little bubble thinking like we all win, like if you're winning, I'm winning, like we're figuring something out. But people bring that up so much. And I think that when I think about the people that are most generous in networking and abundant, right? That is abundance in connections. They are the people that are the most confident and actually the most authentically successful. And what I think is going on based on my conversations with people and me reflecting on this a lot is because we aren't nailing, and it actually goes back to the product market fit thing. I think because people aren't aware of how to nail their pocket of the world, we all think we're competing. But if we actually all did a better job at nailing and understanding that mastery and confidence comes from being so clear about who our people are, the pain that they're dealing with, the dream outcome that we provide, our way of doing it, when we nail that, and then we become so good at that, we really see that like we're not actually competing. Like we're all so focused and so good at our pocket. Like we don't need to be competing with everyone else. And I think part of what's going on is like we aren't nailing it, and we aren't nailing it on the business side, and we're not all thriving and successful. So there is this wave of competition that I think is just coming from scarcity and not knowing what to do to hit that point, because I think our nature is all to be abundant and is to be connected. And I think that because we aren't figuring out the business part, it's bringing up the shadow side of us that, if I had to guess, and maybe I'm just projecting, I don't think people want to be in that vibe. Like, I don't think that they really want to. I think it's just been a result of like, I can't pay my bills or I can't figure this out. And I think that I need what you have, when really it's like, no, if you just know what you need to nail, then all of that naturally will come.
No, I agree. I think it definitely comes from fear and scarcity. And I think the challenge is like, if you work in a space and you're energetically, or like you're woo-woo enough, you kind of believe that, abundant. I have a new tattoo on my arm that says, be a blessing and you'll be blessed, right? If you are abundant, if you have an abundant mindset towards other people, like you'll have more abundance come in, just like you said, right? And so I think that's sort of like the challenge. And I agree, there's a lot of fear, and desperation sounds like a bad word, but I think desperation to pay bills, desperation to like make it work, desperation to not go back to corporate or do something that's like not aligned, right? And I totally get that. And also there is a lot of stigma still in the healing space around like what you should charge money for, what is it okay for you to, all of those things that still come up. And so these, I think, are all like environmental factors that really influence this. But in the end, again, I think there is such a big, overwhelming desire to consciously build community, and how you show up with that space and with that energy, like it comes through with all of the people you work with and your clients and stuff like that too. So I think it definitely comes from like fear and scarcity and this desire to not go back to a life that feels misaligned.
If this doesn't happen, if you're not able to reach the goals, your 1,000 clients in this next chapter, ultimately reaching 1 million, and I'm going to say more people, what's the cost?
Okay. Like financially, I'm kind of already hitting the cost right now, which has been hard. But I'm looking at it as like, this is a leverage point where things are kind of bottoming out a little bit. I think in the past, at least, in all the ups and downs, it's felt like a big hit to self-esteem and self-confidence for sure, because you feel like you just can't make it work. And then you go out and you get more certifications. Like I have like 15 different certifications at this point. And so that becomes like a thing. And again, to your point, you kind of you try to find someone, like you trade your money to like, be like, you know the answer, you're going to help me figure it out, right? I feel like I've done a lot of that, to be honest. And so I don't think that's necessarily where I'm going. I do think that the potential, I had a moment very recently where I really realized that like my calling is a blessing and it was given to me like when I was 2 years old. And by not doing that, it's like selfish of me to not do that and to not help the people who I'm meant to help. So I think there's that cost from that side. I think for me personally, I feel like I'll end up in some corporate job, which I have tried to do some consulting work and stuff in the past year and a half, and it's felt like dredge. It's felt so horrible. Yeah, it's been really shitty. So I'm like, okay, is that it's an option that's on the table. So I don't think that I'm going to be like broken, destitute, like living homeless somewhere, which I think I'm lucky and I'm grateful for that. But I think that it's going to be really hard to be doing work that feels so, again, misaligned and just like not like my truest self. I think there's so much, despite all the cyclical nature of everything, there's so much freedom you do have in terms of your schedule, in terms of your life. I travel a lot, like with my business, and boundaries that I have with myself, like things that are just not as acceptable in the corporate world. Like they just don't want to care about like, oh, you have this coming up, that coming up. Or like going back to selling, marketing, like something that I don't believe in. And so I think that's sort of the part that's really, I feel like the big cost is, yeah, it's not going to be like, I'll figure it out financially. I always figure it out. It's just like, imagine knowing what you're supposed to do. Because again, I think it might have mattered less when I was like a dating coach and it didn't feel aligned. And now that it feels aligned and it clicked, imagine knowing what you're supposed to do and your purpose and then having to choose, let's just say choose, or being forced into choose to go live a life that's completely misaligned. I think that feels like gripping.
It's so big. It's so huge. That cost is so huge. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people. One of the ways that how what we do is backwards is that, and you've probably experienced this working in the corporate world, a lot of the talks and the TED Talks are about guiding people how to find purpose, because outside of our pocket of the world, generally what affects longevity and long-term sustainability for businesses is that they're lacking a mission or a purpose. For instance, I'll be listening to a TED Talk about this and they'll be like, okay, well, you need to nail your why, your how, and your what. Y'all have your what and your how, but you need to find your why. And I listen to it, I'm like, okay, valid. All my people have their why, but then they can't figure out the what and the how, like exactly opposite of what like you're having to teach everyone else. And for the rest of the world, that's the hard part. For us, that's the thing that is already there. That's the thing that is so clear to us. Our North Star is so clear. And if it's not like super clear on the what, like we know where that is. Our body, our beingness, our path, our life, our devotion is so magnetized to that North Star. It's so powerful that we're all just jumping in the ocean, trying to find our way there. Like, I am going to make it there. If we think of the business being the boat and the ship, it's like we need to figure out now how to build that thing that can help guide us there, because our sights are there. Like, we're going to get there. Whereas the rest of the world, a lot of people are in the ships, but there's no North Star. And it's just like chaos and it's just like bonking into each other. Our problem is like exactly the opposite. And if and when we don't have the business, the ship in this metaphor to get us there, like we're drowning, we're floundering, we're trying to get there, but we're like, I'm going to get there. So I hear what you're saying. The cost is massive. These aren't businesses that if they aren't successful, it's just like, oh, it's just not a successful business. I'll try another thing. There is no other thing. We can do something else, but there is no other thing. It's part of why I kept going despite being broke for so many years. And despite, air quotes, failing and investing and it not working and being more confused and more broke, and then still keep going. And then I kept going because people would say, yeah, well, you just need to do something else. I'm like, yes, I get that. But if I did, all I would be thinking about is when and how can I get back to trying to figure this out? So like, Sometimes we might need a reprieve, we need to make some money, sure, but like there is no other thing. Like my beingness is pulled like directly to this thing. There is not really a rhyme or reason.
Yeah, I think it's funny because obviously in a lot of startup world, like you'll see a lot of founders who their first one failed and the second, you know what I mean? And actually it's actually a good thing. Like when you look in the VC world, they actually want you to have failures because they want you to see that you learned and you build from there. I think the only equivalent to that is, to your point, I don't think there is an equivalent, but the only equivalent is maybe you like re-niche and you kind of reshift things. I ran marketing at like a crypto company last year for 6 weeks, 10 hours a week. They paid me a lot of money to work 10 hours a week. And around week 6, they were like, can you work with us longer? And I was like, I'll give you one more week. Because I was so exhausted that it was just energetically draining. And I just did not even have enough energy to put back into my business, even though I was not working that much. And I feel like that's what happens eventually. It's like you feel like your soul gets depleted by doing something because it feels so wrong. It literally feels like you're like, at one point, I'm literally doing something that feels illegal to me and to my person. Like I'm like attacking myself and my body and my mission by not doing something. Now I know that there's always like, there are obviously reasons, financial or otherwise, to like to your point, kind of do something for a short stint. But yeah, I think that part feels really, really hard, and you can try to work around it. You can be like, I'll try to work in a more aligned business. You'll try to make it work, but honestly, it's really hard because you will always be like wondering, to your point, how do I get back to it? And like, what if? You'll be sitting in this like what if loop forever, and the regret will start building inside of you, and that's the worst place to be, because again, it's like I would rather have not known my purpose then and like be on that train, because that's easier to live with than know your purpose and actively decide to go against it.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to say or add before we wrap up today?
The only other thing I wanted to share was, I know we were talking about sort of the loneliness and kind of community, but I think the other part also just is like, obviously like having supportive family and friends. Part of my journey was, there was a lot of negotiation and dealing with like my family and not understanding, and a lot of pushback and a lot of like, why don't you take this job and why don't you do that? And I think that's really hard because now that people who are supposed to believe in you don't believe in you. And that's really hard because you already are like doubting whether you made the right decision, to what we talked about, right? And so my hope for everyone is that they either have that support or they know that happens. Like I'm now 3 years in and it took a while, but at least in the last year and a half, like my family's been very supportive, which has been beautiful. And it's taken a lot of conversation and a lot of like boundary setting and a lot of, my mom and I stopped talking for 6 months. Sometimes it leads to like a lot of difficult things that have to happen, but we're in a better place than ever before. So I just hope for everyone that either they have it or they know that it will get better and that they will have the right people, the aligned people, whether it's their family or other people, will come in and support them along the way as well.
Yeah, so valuable. I went through a very similar thing. I went to law school and graduated and didn't want to be a lawyer. And that was very hard for the people, especially who supported me financially and otherwise, to get that law degree. And very similar to you, there was some relationships that fizzled for a bit of time, and it takes courage to do what you did and do what most of us likely have to do. It's also kind of inherent in the journey of entrepreneurship. It is so unknown and it doesn't make sense to people on the outside. And it's also not, and I had this conversation with someone, I was actually getting interviewed for someone else's podcast. And this got brought up. She was like, well, there must have been a hard time and you had hard conversations and it affected relationships. And it was like, yeah, but the hardest part goes back to what you were just saying, is it wasn't well, let me do it so I can say I told you so. I still haven't figured it out. It still doesn't make sense to people on the outside. I still don't have these massive external markers of success. And it's taken the willingness and the ability to, draw boundaries and also engage in those relationships, even though it still doesn't make sense, and understand how to navigate those relationships. And I told her that it's like, I'm not in a position to even say, I told you so. And not that that was even the goal anyway, but it's taken that conscious ability to engage and repair and nurture and see how relationships can build back and all of the things that come from that. It takes a lot of courage, but it also takes us walking the walk. And I think that's part of why we are in these seats of being the way showers and being the pioneers that we are, and being really capable and qualified and able to support other people on the journey, is that we're going to continue to get handed the journey and continue to learn. And I think that being a mission-driven, heart-led practitioner, healer, coach is answering the call to wake up and transform. And then also adding on the layer of entrepreneurship is just like that double, trippy, quadruple whammy of like, you're going to get handed all the stuff. So like continue to put all of your, all your work to the test. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
No, I guess like the last thing I'll say is I think that, a lot of people will say like, oh, wealth is like 80% psychology, 20% strategy, right? And so obviously, since I do work around subconscious mind and nervous system, I really do believe that. I feel like it's really important that you kind of carve out that time every day, whatever that looks like for you, to kind of prime yourself and prime your nervous system for these difficult conversations, for the expansion, for the cyclical nature of things. Because if you can't build that like safety container, it's going to be really it'll be hard to kind of stay in it and to stay in the messy middle and the uncertainty and the chaos and the cyclical, and also to recognize the small wins and the failures as lessons, right? All those things that you need to do in order to continue to kind of move through it until inevitably you become successful, because that will inevitably happen. And you stay consistent with it, but that requires you to like take care of your inner world and your nervous system as much as possible. So yeah, I would just ask everyone to make sure they take a little bit of time, even if it's 5 minutes every day, to do that work for themselves.
Tania, thank you so much for joining me today to have this conversation. And for those of you who are listening, if any part of this resonated, you're in the right place, please reach out. I want to hear from you. And if you want to reach Tania directly, the links to her website, TikTok, and Instagram are in the show notes. Thank you again, Tania, and to everyone else, thank you for listening. And we'll see you for the next episode of Ren Behind the Practice.